everybody, this is artist and professor Melissa Furness here to chat with you again about a really simple drawing element, graphite, and put it into action in perhaps a new way today. So I just want to start by showing you some materials and kind of prepare some surfaces before we get started. So I think in the past, if you've worked with me before on demos, that you have seen me tape down my paper on all four edges, which I do almost all the time with all my drawings because I always like to paint and draw at the same time instead of just dry media. So I have drawing paper. I also have this canvas paper that I want to try today. And so I'm going to take a sheet of each of these and pull them out and tape them down on all four edges with my masking tape. If you don't have canvas paper, don't worry. You can also just gesso that paper after you've taped it down with 2 coats of gesso, and essentially you're going to have a similar surface to your canvas paper and a really kind of nice resistant surface that allows you to push graphite around in a new and different way, which is what we're going to play around with today. So let's get started with just preparing our surfaces, and then I'll give you some more info and direction on how to use graphite in a kind of more painterly method using acrylic and matte medium. You can even try it with oil paint. I'm not going to necessarily go over that with this particular demo, but if you're feeling very creative, you can just kind of switch it out and use oil paint. Just make sure that you're in a well ventilated area and use solvent instead of water, right? Okay, so let's get things prepared. So here is my canvas paper, which is what I'm going to work with today, and I'm just going to tape it down on all four edges. And when I say that, I mean you need to seal up all four so that there is no open area to that paper. And then once I have that ready, if you're using this canvas paper, which is kind of nice, you're just good to go. You're good to start drawing or paint, or you're doing whatever else you're going to do onto it, because when you've got this kind of heftier surface, you can paint, you can draw, you can do both and beat it up a little bit more. So just a few other materials I'm going to need before we start drawing. I've got matte medium, I've got titanium white paint. If you don't have white paint, the gesso works just as well here. And if, like I said, if you don't have canvas paper, pretend this is drawing paper, and I would just give it, 1 coat of gesso, let it dry, another coat of gesso, then I would be good to go the same way I am here. Other thing is you want to gather your favorite drawing tools. So I'm going to try out some different things and show you what it is like to work both wet and dry. So I tend to like to use more of a greasier, blacker pencil. So I've got a 6B, a 9B, and I also have an ebony pencil, which I quite like. And this is a graphite stick if you want to play around with that. And then my blending stumps. I've got a glass of water that I'll need, and gather a few of your favorite paintbrushes, and then you're pretty well good to go. Also, a little bit of a palette. I have this one here that I can play around with. I'm just going to put, the white and the gesso on here, so I might want to clean that off first. But if not, no big deal either, because this is already dry. And then we're ready to draw. Okay, so let's say that I'm just waiting for my gesso to dry on my paper. So while that's happening, I just wanted to provide you with a few other fun facts about graphite. The interesting thing is that the closest predecessor to graphite drawing pencil really is silver point. This is basically, drawing with metal, which is kind of interesting, kind of fun. I suppose it's sort of like this, but really it's just the metal itself that gives off the color. So maybe you want to try that out. I'll have to do a demo for that in the future. So this was basically until the end of the 16th century, and this was when a large deposit of graphite was actually discovered. So chemistry was really still in its infancy at this time, and so it was, when it was discovered, it was actually thought to be a form of lead. And so you may have heard, people say, oh, the lead pencil. That was really just a big mistake of assuming that it was lead. We all know now that it's quite wrong, and so it's graphite, in fact. So before graphite really became popular as, a way to use a pencil for drawing, it was actually used in a very different way. It was used historically to line molds for cannonballs, and used in war to sort of help shoot these cannonballs smoothly off into the air. So it was called plumbago. So back in the day, graphite was really quite a hot commodity. It was really an important aspect of war, and I think worth a lot of money. But over time that changed. Another interesting fact about graphite is that graphite and diamond are two of the same chemical elements, carbon. And so, hey, guess what? If you were a superhero with the strength of approximately 150,000 tons times the atmospheric pressure at the Earth's surface, you could totally turn your really ordinary drawing pencil, like this one, into a diamond. So, hey, that's super cool. And I say, hey, DC Comics, how about we make the next superhero an artist? Yeah, I could totally go for that. So I think now it's time to get started with drawing. Okay, so I'm going to start working on this drawing. Make sure you kind of set it up so that, you have something interesting to look at, maybe some dramatic lighting. So I'll maybe see what lamp I can find to figure that out. Okay, so I found, a couple of other objects to make my still life a little bit more interesting. I also found a lamp. So you see there the lamp that I have. Those are super cool because you can get them like at Home Depot for $5, and they're really handy for all sorts of painting, drawing, arts stuff to help light your materials and light your still lives or whatever else you're drawing. Now I've got things set up in a way that I like. I got a little bit more interesting lighting and some shadows going on. So now I'm going to start with my graphite pencils. Remember, pencil sharpener is also very handy. I like these ones with the cases because then I don't make a mess everywhere, but you could just get a cup too, that works. So this is my ebony pencil, and then my other graphite pencils I was mentioning to you that are having a good bit more blackness to them, which I like a lot. So I think I'll go with these two 9B and an ebony pencil. So if I'm working with this surface just dry with no wet media, it's kind of fun because the graphite itself will sit on the surface a lot more than it will with regular paper. So I'm just gonna try to get started. Remember, our process of drawing stays the same. Like, we get a rough gesture drawing. So remember what a gesture drawing is that, you want to do a loose kind of rough outline of what you're drawing and get things down, as well as you can on the paper to start. And then you'll kind of shift things and change them a bit as you see the proper proportion and scale that you want. So with objects, you'll notice that I'm always kind of, drawing a sort of spine down the center of them. I treat objects like people sometimes. That's kind of fun, right? Bring them to life. So there's this pepper shaker, and then you want to kind of work your way outward on it and get all those objects in there. I've got a rough gesture down and I'm going to continue drawing. You'll notice that when you're working on this paper that has a coat to it, that you actually use the pencil up a little bit more quickly than you do with straight paper where it soaks into it. And I kind of like that quality. Like I said, I'm able to really push that graphite around on the surface. But you'll notice that there is also a texture. But like, look at this. Like, I can take this blending stump and I can like really get a value in there super quickly and very easily. And so it's actually quite fun to work on this kind of surface. You know, drawing is fun, but it can sometimes be kind of slow and arduous, at least for me. And so I try to find ways where I can do more quickly. And also you can try pushing things around with your eraser too. You can try the graphite stick as well. You know, it just really helps you to, you know, get, you know, some value filled out on that surface straight away, which I appreciate. Otherwise it can take a really long time with that really small point of the pencil. So that's super fun. And that's just straight without adding any wet media, which is what we're gonna do eventually here. I just wanted to show you some of the stuff you could do before you start adding that, in case, you know, you feel inspired and you want to try it out. There's so many different ways that you can play around with graphite. It's such a versatile tool. So I like to call it pushing graphite, because you're pushing that medium as far as you can take it and seeing what happens with it. So you can see there, try to close in a little bit more, how quickly and easily I was able to push something around there. So kind of, I'll try to keep that closed in for a little bit longer, because I don't know, it's just, it's nice to be able to get also a nice crisp, sharp edge to something super easily. You know, you can take the eraser, and the eraser doesn't just erase, it can also just, you know, push it around, something around, like your blending stumps do. So I didn't always use blending stumps actually until recently, because I just would use the eraser most often to push things around, or even my fingers. You know, never be afraid to like stick your fingers in your art. Make it more expressive and interesting. So that gives you a little bit more of an idea of how it looks with just, you know, that straight graphite. I'll zoom back out again here and develop a little bit further, and then I'll switch to using more of that wet media so you can see what else you can do with this material, and kind of make it a combination of painting and drawing, which is what I like to do. So with this part of, you know, the instruction, like I'm taking you through, you know, all the introductory methods of learning how to draw, and this is the part where it gets a lot more fun, where you get to do the experimental stuff, because you've learned the basics, right? We know how to build the drawing, we know how to map out proportion and scale, and now we just get to like play with our materials, which is super fun. You know, take a closer look at the values that you see there too. And you see how I can stick my fingers in there and push it around really easily also. So also, if you're working with this canvas paper or gesso paper, you can even gesso it yourself. You can work with acrylic paint over the top of it. You can even work with an oil paint on the top of it. Like when I was learning how to paint, and my professor would have us work on gessoed paper, because, you know, we all know that our very first forays into trying to do oil painting are a crazy mess. So then you don't feel like you've like invested all this money in buying this fancy canvas and then made a freaking mess of it. Haha. So there's a bit of that. I'm not going to do this perfectly because I am going to go in with the wet media, like I said. So as I'm mapping this out, I'm also correcting a few proportions and scale You know, I see the bell jar actually goes out a bit further here, so I'm gonna fix that as I go. I think it's probably a bit wider than I might imagine. Okay, so I've got a base layer of what I want to work with my still life here, and so I'm going to go to this matte medium. I'm going to put some here on my palette and show you what it's like to kind of push the graphite around with the matte medium. I have a couple of different paint brushes, and you also have water, which is here. Maybe a little bit of water, but more medium. And you can use this wet media to help you smooth things out and also further play around with that graphite and develop your values with more precision and detail, which is what I like to do. So, you know, it's good to have a variety of brushes, maybe even like a wet and a dry brush, or one that is a little bit larger or smaller. So you can even see what happens when you push the graphite around, just even with water as well. So it just makes it, it gives you the ability to smooth it out, get rid of some of the texture of the paper if you don't like that, which I don't always like that. And see what you can do with those values, okay? So that's just with the matte medium. So I would suggest doing that first. I usually go back in later with the white to put in little details of highlights that I see on the forms, like looking for those categories of light like we talked about before. The other thing too is that you still have your graphite pencils around, and you can go back and forth. You can draw into that wetness with the graphite itself. Here, I'll zoom in a bit more so you can see clearly what I'm doing. So you can put more graphite down, push it around more, and see what else that medium will allow you to do with it. I admit with oil paint, obviously, since it doesn't dry so much like acrylic does, you can push it around even further, but I don't want to work in I don't want to have to worry about, you know, being out in the open air and ventilating right now. So I'm going to work with something that is a bit easier for me to do at home on my own. I could go out to the studio for doing an oil painting one at some point here, but I just wanted to show you some introductory basics, and I invite you, after you learn some of these things from me, to show me how else you can use that material. Show me other ideas that might come to mind, and how you can push that graphite even further than what I've shown you. Because I'm here to just help inspire you, give you some ideas, and I'm hoping that you'll take these ideas and make them your own and turn it into some super cool art that you like and that you love. Okay, so with this view, you can see how I'm kind of fiddling with the values and what I can do with that pepper shaker there. So essentially what I like to do is not get too detailed with one thing. I always, tell my students it's super important to work on a drawing as a whole and work on the full composition as you go, and not just do one object at a time, because what happens if I filled out all the details of this pepper shaker and then all of a sudden I realized it was like out of proportion and I had to change the whole thing, and then I've just wasted a massive amount of time, because we all know that time is precious, right? So that's why I show you these methods of gesture, deciding, and mapping, and then getting into the details later after that, because if you get too excited to start with and you jump the gun, then you end up making mistakes, right? So I'm just kind of trying to see the composition as a whole and pushing and pulling as I go. Like I said, you know, you can go back and forth with the graphite, add in more for some more darker tones, and then put some more medium and water in there until you get it to be what you want it to be. So then if I kind of switch over to one of these lighter objects, you know, what I can do is in a minute here, I can add in some white if there are areas that I felt like got too dark too quickly. But this area is a little bit in shadow, so I'm okay with that bit sort of staying there. Trying to like get the curve, you know, of that handle as it goes across the form, and I see the shadow there. Okay, so now I'm going to try some white, titanium white, super white. Like I said, if you don't have acrylic paint, you can just use gesso for this too, because gesso is essentially just white paint. Okay, and then I can play around with this cup a little bit more and sort of see what I can do to sort of smooth out certain areas that maybe got a little bit too gray. It's fun to be able to use the wet media and work a little bit more quickly than just with straight graphite. So what I'll do is I'll just keep working on this still life a little bit more, and you can see how I fill out the piece. And then we'll try out a few other kind of very different experimental marks as we proceed. So I kind of let this sit and dry a bit, and I'm coming back to it again because, you know, I always like to build a drawing in layers, and I was seeing that things were getting a little bit muddy, so I let it dry, and now I'm able to add in more darkness into like the salt shaker here, or pepper shaker, excuse me. And then I should be able to finish out the details of the drawing from there. So I'm going to go back and forth between, you know, the graphite and the paint here to see how I can further you know, refine those details and make it what I want it to be. And so I urge you to think about that too. You know, a drawing isn't just an outline that you then fill in with value or color or whatever. A drawing is a process of layering, just like a painting is. It should be built up over time and considered in that way. It should have depth and history and interest to it. So I'm using the blending stump again as well to smooth some things out, and then I can go back with the wet media also until it becomes, you know, the full drawing with the detail that I want it to have, right? So with that other layer underneath, you can see I'm able to really make that black a bit richer and darker. I'm having a little bit more fun with some of the details. And then, you know, I can define that top a little bit more. And go back to the paint brush as well. And if I really want, I can even use a smaller brush. Just depends on what you feel comfortable with. Okay, so now I have this still life established. What I want to do is just play around with these materials a little bit further in the outer area. Just so that, you know, I get a little bit more experience with what these tools can do and how I can be a little bit maybe even more expressive with how to use this graphite and the acrylic medium and the acrylic paint, because, you know, you can play around with, like, if I like lay just wet medium down, for instance. Here I can zoom in a bit there. So So you see that I've laid in the wet medium, and then if I draw, like there it is on the dry area, and then if I go over to the wet area, you can see how the mark becomes more fluid and crisper and without that texture. You see that? So you can play around with that, and or you can push it around further with even more medium and water. And you can also like build the paint up thick. Let me grab some more acrylic there. And I can see what it looks like to like draw into some thicker paint, because what it does is it creates these sort of edges where the graphite would be kind of like digging into that paint. So you see that? And so that creates kind of a unique look that I think is interesting too. So what I want you to do then is to fill that outer space with some marks, and they can be totally abstracted marks. Play around with wet on wet and drawing into the paint. Put the white down, and you see how the white picks up the graphite even and creates a gray tone, which is kind of nice in a background area. Try what I did with that thicker paint and like drawing into it with the pencil in a different way. And like you can even have like layers, like I've got that gray there, and then I draw in with that. It's all about just experimenting as much as possible with the medium and seeing what it can do for you and how you can utilize it in unique ways. And try different brushes even too. Or you can even pool up the water and then let it dry and see what happens over time. So like I said, fill out that outer space with some cool kind of marks. Hopefully you can see what I was doing there. I'll zoom out a little bit more again. So playing around with broader marks, smaller marks, seeing how far I can, like if you have that graphite down there, see how far you can pull it out from that pencil mark that you made. And so you see what I can do there? I'm putting a really aggressive dark mark in there, trying my graphite stick, whatever tools you have around, experiment. And then I can just grab the matte medium and see how far I can pull it outwards. Or maybe like a combination of, like the drawing and the painting techniques too. So, put those abstract marks in there, but also like think about the overall finished look of, the still life with those included. It's kind of interesting to create a work that is both abstract and has these representational elements in there. So have some fun with it and play. Thank you everybody for joining me with this graphite demo today. It was a lot of fun pushing around graphite with a medium and acrylic paint. I hope that you'll join me again next time, and I will catch you later. Bye.